Interviews with Phil Pelucha, founder of Billionaires and Boxers, award-winning revenue architect to investment portfolios managing over $20 billion. Recruitment million dollar biller with 2 successful exits from international search firms he built himself. This is the Recruitment Revolution, where Phil sits down with the real recruitment and executive search leaders growing businesses, making placements, and changing the industry from the inside.
Billionaires and boxers, billionaires and boxers, time to grow, make the world know all about you, billionaires and boxers, let's go.
Okay, so let's just dive straight into it. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. It's funny, for obviously people watching, you won't know this. We've actually just got off a 30-minute impromptu phone call before this, so hopefully we didn't give away all the gold in the call that wasn't recorded. But for our guests and I hope not. But for our guests and the people who are viewing this, do you want to just kind of give a brief introduction on who you are and sort of a 10,000 foot overview of your background?
I will do my best. Now, thank you for having me, and nice to see your face today. So, so I have done too many years in recruitment, talent acquisition and intelligence projects. I initially started as a traditional exec search recruiter working FMCG food, and over the years had the benefit of actually working in more intelligence-based projects and bespoke recruitment projects, which were more about supporting decision makers at the front end of the hiring process and really getting them to understand structures, hiring decisions, the markets before they actually went into recruitment. And then about 11 years ago, I decided to move away from corporate recruitment and actually set up my own business. And we've been doing that across lots of different markets. And generally speaking, being brought in for the hard to fill, difficult roles and difficult hires.
No, love that. Absolutely love it. And but our viewers and listeners may not. I, for my sins, grew and exited 2 recruitment firms, one in the US and one in the UK. So I understand the pain entirely. You've reached a really interesting point in your career, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, right? Because you either become a lifer in recruitment, or you take all of the knowledge that you've learned, and then you support other people in more of a consulting role. So whether that's helping them to identify the right talent, get the best out of the talent that they have, create the right cultures, etc. But the market's at a bit of an interesting place right now. I know there's a lot of stuff that people are focused on and almost everybody's talking about. You know, what are you hearing most often through that work that we're doing in terms of the recruitment, hard to fill roles, moving into consulting? Yep. Like, what are you hearing over and over again?
Well, first of all, the thing that's really obvious to everybody is that the world's changing at a really fast pace. Decisions and responding to, whether it was a COVID, a Brexit, a war, whatever situation it might be, is really affecting people's decision making. And that's mostly around cutting costs, getting more out of your teams, restructuring, leveraging AI. So what I'm noticing is that people are trying to make decisions for the longer term, but trying to do it in a really lean way, often missing a trick in the way that they're doing it, because there's lots of bespoke services and bespoke solutions that they could utilize to make better decisions and cost cut. But also, like we were talking about 30 minutes ago, AI has just been such a big subject. Everyone I speak to is trying to find different ways of bringing that in. And now I'm seeing a lot of leaders kind of pushing people into investigating and forcing them to find solutions to find a quick win. Like they I'd say your biggest topics.
It's an interesting one, because that happens a lot with technology, right? And it's not just AI. Like, I've seen this over and over again. So I was working in the real estate world for a long time when prop tech and real estate tech started to become a thing. And what you realized was that there were 3 things actually, and I see the same thing with AI as well. Number one is that people are trying to use technology to replace humans. And my belief has always been that technology is there to enhance the human experience and not to replace it. The second one is there is no clear strategy as to what it is you're trying to achieve. So you almost end up acting like a magpie. You're just, purchasing systems and trying to squeeze it all in and hope it magically forms into a cohesive strategy. And the third one, and this isn't a criticism of anybody, it's just something I've seen a lot, is because it's so new, people aren't really even right now aware of what it is that it can do. So there is no clear vision on, I'm trying to get here, now let me find the tools to support me to do that. And AI has been really big with that. So you've got people who are all in on AI, fully embracing it. You've got people who still treat it like a bit of a gimmick. You've got people buying a million different AI systems and just sort of squeezing and hoping something happens. And AI is amazing. You know how much I use AI, even on my portfolio investment side for private equity. But it's like any form of technology. Garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what you're trying to get it to do and feeding it the right data, it's not going to do what you hope it's going to do. And it rarely happens by accident.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, a couple of years ago, and I won't say which tool, but I spent quite a lot of money into my investing in a tool which was going to unearth all this data and aggregate an AI, backdrop basically that was going to learn from us. And I remember doing a search for actually it was for dentist recruitment, and so I put in all my search criteria. And I was getting drivers and really random people come up on the search. And I'm thinking, this is a waste of time. I've been telling you now for weeks what I'm looking for. I'm giving you the thumbs up and the thumbs down. And it's like, why are you not learning it? And it was just such an expensive way of working out that actually a lot of these tools are not that efficient, that actually I was quicker at working out what I needed and talent pipelining by using my own knowledge, my own network, my own research. And it was just taking a very long time for it to learn. So you're right, what goes in really matters.
Nice.
Who actually checks the data and what the output is. And it just depends on whether you've got time to invest in teaching that tool to give you what you want. It can be very, very costly and very time consuming.
Well, where it pulls from is a fascinating discussion. I mean, we won't go too down the rabbit hole, but, one of the things I see happening with AI a lot is, people say, oh, I'm using Claude or I'm using GPT or I'm using Perplexity or whatever. But if it's pulling from the internet, what OpenAI in particular has a habit of doing is if it doesn't know something, it tries to fill in the gaps. And there are people who've kind of done really detailed reports on it, and the statistics in there are completely made up. It's just made them up because it needed something to put in there. And people don't realize that unless you give it a specific prompt to say you only have to go off verified data, you can't make anything up. It will fill in the gaps. It will color it in. Which, look, if you're trying to get creative, is fine. But if you're looking for something that you're going to present to a client or make critical business decisions off, having it make up data is not a great place to go, because now you're dealing entirely in fiction. And that's one of the big things for me about the technology industry is that when you have the right consultant, and this is what I love about what you do, you understand recruitment, you understand that background, you understand how that works, but you also understand how the AI integration works. You've made your own mistakes. You've seen clients make these mistakes. You've seen what works. You've seen what hasn't. You know how to reduce the costs, because that's a really big one for people at the minute, is that they're really trying to make the most out of their budget. They're trying to reduce costs. They may even be trying to make the most out of their existing team. Having somebody like you that has that full oversight, you're not just an AI person that only understands AI and doesn't understand recruitment, but you're also not just a recruitment person that doesn't understand how the business infrastructure works, how HR works, and how AI works. So I feel like that's a pretty awesome blend. And if my goal right now was to be saving money in the business and getting that integration, that's why I'd be on the phone to you.
Well, yeah, you can absolutely be on the phone to me. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really unique and wonderful position to be in, to be able to see how it works. And at heart, I'm a recruiter. I love filling jobs, and that's really satisfying. Obviously, want to do it quicker, want to do it better. I've had to reduce costs in my business, so we're trialing people to pass that knowledge on to in-house teams so that they're not having to, lose thousands in investments, which they can't really go back on, because once you've got board sign off, it's really difficult, and you trained your team. It's a really nice position to be in, to be able to give them advice and to help them not make the same mistakes, but also to work out which bit is AI, which bit is automation, which bit actually you still need to do. Especially for some of the industries that we work within, they're really hard to find skill sets. And for some of those areas, actually AI and automation doesn't always work. It can be beneficial, but you don't want to, ruin your brand, the candidate journey. So it's just being really mindful about the places that you're in and what your talent attraction strategy needs to be for each part of your business, because it's not a one size fits all.
No, you're 100% right. I completely agree. And the interesting thing, and this has always been the case with internal talent teams, and I can say this firsthand because in between my agencies, which I then exited, I went and became a global talent director for a large corporate, right? And so I've now sat both sides of the fence, and I can tell you firsthand, one of the really challenging things from an in-house perspective is that you're in a silo. You're only learning from your own business. Whereas in the agency world, you're constantly learning from your teammates, from your other offices, from competitors. So as the industry moves, you're progressing and learning with it. But the second you go internal, unless they have somebody like you saying to them, here's how AI works, here's how cost reduction works, here's how talent pipelining works, here's how salary benchmarking works, their knowledge of what was happening in the industry stopped the second they went internal, because now they're only learning from each other and they all have the same information. And that's a challenge, as you said earlier, in a world that is moving so quickly, because you're trying to apply yesterday's tactics to tomorrow's problem. And that's not going to work.
No, that's a really difficult space to be in. And I guess the benefit I've also got, which has been really nice, is that, we're essentially hired as a research partner to support organisation and decision making. So you're always looking out to see what other organisations are doing and validating it and looking at real time data. It's not hypothetical answers. Also, I speak to a lot of talent acquisition directors and people in the industry, and you can hear people's pain points. So I've got the benefit of hearing where they've invested, where they've gone wrong, where they've hung back, where maybe they think it could be beneficial, to be able to pass that knowledge on to other people. And hopefully, like you said, help them save cost, time and pain.
No,
because it is painful when you get it wrong and you've got to unpick it, or you're going to a board presentation and you've got all this data and actually it's not being validated. It's like, it's painful for senior decision makers to sit there and not to sound credible.
It's incredibly painful, because especially people who are outside of recruitment, they don't really understand what the industry kind of is and what it takes to do this. So, I remember having conversations with hiring managers, even when I was a talent director, and they'd say, well, this role's been outstanding for 3 weeks now. What's taking so long? And it's like, well, do you think we just stick out an advert and all the right people come and find us, and it's just a case of like arranging interviews? Or like, well, how overly simplistic do you think this is? Like, if this existed, I wouldn't have a job. Especially when it's in, I was doing a lot with surveyors, and at the time, there was a real skill gap, and I blame the British government for this in particular, because short version, they'd stopped funding RICS qualifications for about a 5 or 6 year period. So what you had was a 5 or 6 year period where graduates were about 5 to 10% of what they had been. So all of the older surveyors were retiring, and there was a big skill gap right in the middle where somebody should be 5 years experience, and there's nobody there. But all the companies still needed to replace the people who were retiring or becoming independent contractors or whatever. And we were all going after this same really small pond. And what a lot of companies didn't realize was a lot of it came down to culture. It wasn't even about money. It was about, do I believe in the ethos? Am I excited about the projects? Do I like the kind of feel of what we're doing? Do I like what we stand for? Are we focused on sustainable development? All those kind of things. And that is something that if you haven't been inside recruitment having those conversations, you may never recognize the importance of that when people want to understand, what does it feel like to work there, not just what does my job spec look like and how much are you going to pay me. If it was that simple, every role would be filled.
Yeah, and I see that across the board in a number of areas. You can look at engineering and manufacturing, or any sector engineering. Basically, it's just like aging population, people not coming through. You also see it in health and safety. You can see it in some clinical areas, but also entry-level roles are really difficult. So it's sometimes not even some of those skilled areas, but those can be difficult, because to get the attention of some of these, young people coming into their careers, it's difficult. You've got lots of different roles. You've got TikTok, Instagram generation coming through, being led into different areas. So if you're trying to build your pipeline internally, you're trying to bring in these wonderful people early on in their career, you've got to really sell your organization. You've got to sell your industry. Food manufacturing, who wants to work on a production floor, but it's so important. Or fresh produce. There's so many incredible sectors that need these wonderful people to come into them. But unless you've got strong people making connections and educating people on the sector, you're going to lose them. And actually, just on a totally random subject, we're talking to somebody, and it goes back to AI about the fact that how people are trying to use AI to replace, these entry-level job roles, which is also going to create a real skill set shortage, because where are these people going to gain experience in these entry-level roles to get that mid-management point? So whilst we are trying to use AI to support us and to make things quicker, we've also got to think about how do we build our future talent and future leaders. If we're not giving them the opportunity, there is a challenge there.
That's really interesting, because I've only ever looked at that from the other side, which is fascinating. But you're absolutely right. But when people talk to me about, we're going to replace jobs with AI, I always think about two things. Number one, are you aware of the skill shortage in AI, right? So to design the right systems, like who's doing this for you? And secondly, and in fact, Sam Altman was talking about it recently, the amount of infrastructure that is needed for data warehouses, for the data storage that is needed for all of these AI systems is astronomical. And construction's had a 20-year skill gap. So now we need somebody to design it, and there's a skill shortage, and then we need someone to build the physical infrastructure to house it, and there's a skill shortage there. And yet so many industries are looking at this saying, we're just going to replace it with AI. It's like at some point there's a big crunch coming where demand is going to outstrip supply multiple times over. And in fact, when you were talking about the younger generation, we saw this a lot with the Great Resignation in the US. We've seen this with the remote working movement. There's a guy that I know. He runs a sales investment business in the real estate industry, and he has about 100 to 150 people on the phones. He said it's been a nightmare to recruit for about the past 12 months because everybody that they would usually take into that role says, why do I have to be in an office? Why do I have to travel into city center to work in an office 8 hours a day? It's a phone. I have a phone at home. Like, you have a CRM. It's cool. I have a laptop, I can be from wherever. I can go do this in Bali. I can do this from my house. Why am I getting the train or driving into the city center at rush hour to sit in an office in a suit, by the way, on the phone when no one can see me? Like, why would I do that? And I feel like this is the first time we've actually had a generation of people coming through that have actually felt confident enough to ask that question. Why am I here? Why do I? It's like, well, you're in the office 8 hours a day. Why? Why do I have to do that? Yeah. So the ones who've been cleaning up are the companies that have been innovative and creative, and the sort of flexi time and, part on site, part remote. Like, they're the ones who have done well because they've changed their culture to almost ask the same question. Why do you have to do it this way? Whereas, and I'm sure you saw the same thing, I saw so many people talking about the back to work crisis. They were never stopping to ask why people had to come back to work. It was all about how do we get them back in the office? And it was such a fascinating conversation.
And it still goes on. Most clients that I've worked with have opted for a hybrid model. It works. It's been great for opening up talent pools for them to be able to access the best candidates, not just candidates in a region or, just on their doorstep. So it's been wonderful. But there are still some organizations that are struggling also with that balance, especially in these hard to find skill sets where you're having to ask questions around why is 3 days in the office absolutely important when this person exists and they want to work for you, but they just can't get to you. Think, get to you once a month. How important is it? So data and insights into where those people are crucial to help people actually understand what their culture needs to look like. And with the younger generation, when I've done a lot of actually more like the Project RPO, where you're shooting on to help people actually build a team, go in, go out once it's built. We're having to spend a lot of time educating people about culture and fit and values and helping them understand why it might be beneficial to spend a few days in the office. What's the value add? What's the career development? So that they understand that there is a balance in that for a lot of organizations, and it will allow them to progress their careers a lot quicker if they can learn. But it does take a mindset shift, which again means you've got to have strong recruiters, strong hiring managers, a strong employer branding, and your whole candidate journey has to be able to reflect the value add for them.
That makes a whole lot of sense. No, you're right. You and I could do this for hours. And I think there'll be a group of people who are very interested and a group of people that are like, oh, please don't go for hours. So I'll tell you what, we'll do this again another time. But I have one final question for you. But before I do, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, I will quite happily post some of my details. You can get in contact with me on LinkedIn, and there's plenty of ways of finding me on the website as well through rja-consulting.co.uk. But I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere attached to this.
Oh, there certainly will. So if you haven't seen it already, check out the comments below. I'll put website link and your LinkedIn profile in there as well. I have one final
my number then.
Yeah. Okay, everything. Here's your address. Here's what time you go to gym. Stalker's paradise. No, let's not do that. But I do have one final question for you before we go, because I love your experience in recruitment, and you and I can nerd out about that all day long. But we've talked about some of the problems that people will be experiencing and going through, and you've talked about speaking to a lot of talent directors and feeling those pain points. What would you say is the number one pain point that you come across, and what one piece of advice would you give to somebody right now to make them feel slightly better about it?
I would say that the biggest pain point is cost cutting and budget. So people trying to see whether they need roles or not need roles, what does the structure look like? And I would say that the best thing you can do is, one, reflect on what you need for the longer term, and then work with an external partner to actually map out, or a really good in-house team that can map out for you. Does that skill set exist? Mm-hmm. What's it going to cost? How are you going to attract that talent to basically make the absolute right decision that's going to give you dividends? And don't wait until the absolute pain point to recruit and then have to make a decision that's based on pressure, not the right candidate.
No, I love that. I love that. That's a great piece of advice. And look, you're too modest to say it, so I'll say it for you, because I'm like a bull in a china shop. I've seen the results you achieve. You're phenomenal at this, both at kind of helping them to reduce the cost, but also kind of going in and helping the team to understand how to kind of move that momentum forward. Because sometimes when you work with a consultant, it's great during the period that you work with them, but then as soon as they leave, you're kind of on your own again. And I love that isn't how you work. I love that the way that you've got your results is you help them achieve the results whilst you're there, but you also lay the foundation with the internal team and with key people so that they can continue to move that momentum forward. So if any of this has resonated to anybody listening to this, highly recommend check the comments below. Go and get in touch, drop a message, drop a call, ask a question. But yeah, you're too nice to say that about yourself, so I'll say it about you instead. Because I've seen the other side of it. So highly recommend people get in touch. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope people have enjoyed this.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Always love our conversations. Like, literally, how many windows have opened in my mind now? So I need to hold those.
Too many tabs open at once, right?
Thank you again.
No, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for watching this interview on Billionaires in Boxes. If you would like to join us as a guest on Billionaires in Boxes, or indeed on Pelucha TV, all you have to do is email us at vipbookings@billionairesinboxes.com.